We now have a two-tier legal system, James,
yes.
whereby white men will be treated harsher now under British law, James.
Well, yeah, it's really, really shocking, this. Basically now they have put in this system whereby pre-sentencing reports, which basically automatically take into account your race, your gender, your circumstance, all of that to mitigate the sentences that you might get for whatever crime you're alleged to have committed and been brought before the courts and convicted of. That now means essentially that white Britons are going to get the worst treatment when it comes to sentencing. This is the two-tier justice system. This is why they call Keir Starmer two-tier Keir. And I'll tell you something, guys, but the other point...
Even Kier Starmer recognises what a catastrophe this is.
Yeah.
Disappointed in this response, and the Lord Chancellor is obviously continuing to engage on this, and we're considering our response. And, you know, all options are on the table, but I am disappointed at this outcome, and now we'll have to consider what we do as a result.
Oh, I don't know, if only there was a Prime Minister who cared about the issue could do something. You're the Prime Minister, Kier. I mean, he's acting like he's just some dude off the street who's a little bit aggrieved.
Yes, it's ridiculous. But James, the reality is what they have literally done is brought in laws whereby if you are any of those identity politics groups, women, gays, of ethnic whatever origin, anything other than a white man must be treated more leniently. So by definition, white men will be treated harsher under the British legal system.
And we'll just be really frank about what we're talking about here. We're talking about, you know, basically people of color, people of different religions getting a lighter sentence and a lighter treatment. And so this means, you know, a lot of migrants who might commit crime, they're going to get a lighter treatment than somebody who is a Briton committing the same crime. That's shocking. Keir Starmer, I don't trust anything he has said there about claiming that he's distressed about that, because, you know, this is the same guy who saw his opinion numbers absolutely plummet and then started talking about, oh, maybe we have to do something about immigration. Really, Keir? Really? Okay, fine. Now you tell us.
Treatment when it comes to punishment. The UK has long presented itself as a defender of liberty and fairness, ideals that have shaped its character for centuries. Yet recently, there's a rising belief that things are shifting. J.D. Vance, recognized for his sharp views on politics, has raised alarms that Britain is moving away from these founding ideals. And he's not alone. Large numbers across the nation share the same discomfort. One major issue at the center of debate is the transformation of the legal system. Updated sentencing rules now consider elements such as ethnicity, gender, and social standing. Advocates claim it's a step toward correcting deep-rooted imbalances. But opponents fear it may mean justice is no longer impartial, with equality replaced by identity-driven decisions. Vance has spoken about this before. He's criticized Britain's stance on immigration, insisting that open borders have weakened public safety. Now, with these legal changes, more citizens are questioning whether the nation is staying loyal to its traditions or slowly losing its way. Before we continue, let us ask, are you enjoying the video? If so, remember to hit like, share with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more updates on the big shifts in UK politics. All right, let's get back on track. As we move ahead, let's examine how Labour leader Keir Starmer fits into this debate. The revised sentencing framework has sparked heavy discussion. Through this model, pre-sentence reports now weigh factors like an offender's race, gender, and background before deciding punishment. The intention is to address past wrongs and reduce systemic bias, but it has also raised strong doubts about genuine fairness. Critics argue that while it aims to balance outcomes, it might do the reverse, granting lighter treatment to certain minority communities, while others, including white citizens, could face harsher penalties for identical crimes. This has fueled claims that justice in Britain is no longer neutral. Rather than being judged purely by actions, individuals are judged in part by identity. And that, many argue, weakens one of the central rules of law, that everyone must be treated the same. Detractors, among them American Senator J.D. Vance, warn that this approach risks forming a two-track legal system, where identical offenses bring different consequences depending on who commits them. It's a troubling shift that leaves many wondering, is genuine justice still achievable in today's courts? Keir Starmer recently stated that free expression is thriving in the UK. But U.S. Senator J.D. Vance wasn't persuaded. He challenged the claim, pointing to what he views as a serious issue: the gradual weakening of free expression under the cover of hate speech regulations. While Starmer presents an optimistic view, Vance insists the truth is far more concerning. These rules, he argues, are being applied to silence disagreement and restrict honest debate. In his eyes, Starmer is either overlooking the matter or deliberately dismissing it for political gain. The worry goes beyond shielding people from truly harmful language. It's about the fading distinction between offensive speech and personal opinion. And as that boundary grows less clear, authorities find it easier to punish citizens simply for expressing beliefs. Vance's remarks highlight a wider anxiety over the course Britain is taking on free expression. Yet Starmer appears unwilling to recognize the issue. For many, that refusal is deeply...
But the thing, too, the other week, there was that phenomenal speech that J.D. Vance gave at the European Union, where he called out Britain, and he called out Europe, but he called out Britain in particular and said that Britain, which was a bastion of liberty, has no longer become that, and they are straying very far away from that. And the real point is that if America is going to go and defend liberal democracies, and you want to be defended, you've got to act like a liberal democracy. And Britain has strayed so far from the centuries. It took centuries for Britain to develop the traditions of law and liberty that we enjoy as well. And now they're torching them at a rate of knots.
Under the UK's new identity-driven sentencing rules, many fear that white citizens could end up facing tougher penalties than others. These updated guidelines consider factors such as race and gender when deciding punishments, meaning a person's background might influence the severity of their outcome. Although the aim is to address historic wrongs, the reality is drawing sharp concern. By judging individuals differently based on who they are, we risk weakening one of the justice system's core foundations: equality under the law. Justice should remain blind, impartial, and fair regardless of race, gender, or origin. Yet, for many, it feels as though we're moving further from that principle. Rather than focusing strictly on actions, the system now appears more concerned with identity. This shift doesn't just cause uncertainty, it fuels division. Even more, trouble.
This undermines the most basic principle of our justice system. That justice is blind, that everyone's equal under the law, that you're not going to get preferential treatment based on who you are. And we already see it happening even before this formal recognition that it's happening. We have seen it over and over again with people getting ridiculously lenient sentences and then having people in the UK locked up for being in an anti-immigration protest, even if they weren't guilty of anything that was approaching violence, but they were at a violent protest, so they were guilty by association. Same thing doesn't happen with these pro-Palestinian protests.
Under the revised sentencing framework, migrants and minority groups could be given softer penalties than others. The new rules weigh factors such as race and background, which in some cases result in reduced sentences for particular individuals. Critics fear this could harm social cohesion. When citizens believe justice isn't applied evenly, it sparks frustration and widens rifts between groups. The idea that the law should remain blind, treating all people equally regardless of identity, now seems at risk. With time, that could fuel deeper resentment and mistrust.
Most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Keir Starmer's stance on immigration and border control has been inconsistent. At times, he's backed looser policies and greater openness, only to reverse course once public sentiment shifted. This lack of clarity has sparked serious doubts about what he truly believes on the matter. One of his strongest critics, J.D. Vance, has accused him of avoiding a firm position on border security, claiming he's more concerned with pleasing everyone than addressing the worries of ordinary citizens. According to Vance, Starmer appears disconnected from people genuinely anxious about the impact of unchecked migration on jobs, public resources, and national safety. Rather than tackling these issues directly, Starmer seems preoccupied with political maneuvering, appealing to activists instead of listening to the wider public. For many, this back and forth only strengthens the view that he's out of touch with the real challenges people face.
For being in an anti-immigration protest, even if they weren't guilty of anything that was approaching violence, but they were at a violent protest, so they were guilty by association. Same thing doesn't happen with these pro-Palestinian protests. That's right. A very different approach. So we have seen it over and over again, and we're not immune from it. It's happening right here.
J.D. Vance hasn't hesitated in criticizing the UK's current path. He's especially troubled by what he views as a break from the nation's long-standing dedication to liberal democratic values. One of his greatest concerns? The country's weakening stance on border security, something he believes is essential to sovereignty and stability. In Vance's eyes, Britain, once respected as a symbol of freedom and the rule of law, is sliding away from its core ideals. He argues that political correctness and leniency in justice have taken priority over the firm standards that once defined the nation. For him, the failure to secure borders isn't simply a flawed policy. It's a signal that the UK is losing its identity and control over its future. And he's not the only one who feels that way. Many across the country are increasingly dissatisfied with how immigration is managed. Public sentiment shows a rising demand for stronger border enforcement, fueled by worries over both community unity and economic stability. Vance's warning has resonated with those who believe Britain has strayed off course, and they're calling for a return to bold, decisive.
That there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
For generations, the belief that justice is blind has stood at the core of the UK's legal tradition. It's meant to ensure that every person is treated the same under the law, regardless of race, gender, or background. But that principle is beginning to fade with the growth of identity-based sentencing. Now, personal details such as an individual's race, gender, or life circumstances can shape how strict or lenient a sentence may be. While the purpose may be to correct past wrongs, it often creates a new kind of bias. Rather than treating everyone equally, the system risks offering certain groups preferential treatment based on identity. This presents a serious issue because fairness and equality are meant to form the bedrock of justice. If the law no longer applies consistently to all, then what remains of justice itself? For many, it feels like society is drifting away from impartiality, where each person, regardless of background, is held to the same standard. And this isn't limited to the UK. A similar pattern is unfolding in the US, where policies increasingly place identity above the rule of law. These developments are raising concern on both sides of the Atlantic, especially as they begin to affect not only justice, but also freedom of expression. Australia is showing signs of heading in the same direction, too. New legislation on hate, speech, and identity-driven measures suggest this is no longer a localized trend. It's becoming global. More nations are shifting away from classical liberal values that emphasize the individual and moving toward approaches centered on groups. Identity. That change carries serious risks, not just for personal freedoms, but
Mr. Speaker, we've been preparing for all eventualities ahead of the confirmation of US tariffs later today. Let me be clear with the House. A trade war is in nobody's interests. And the country deserves, and we will take, a calm, pragmatic approach. That's why constructive talks are progressing to agree a wider economic prosperity deal with the US. That's why we're working with all industries and sectors likely to be impacted. Our decisions will always be guided by our national interest, and that's why we have prepared for all eventualities, and we will rule nothing out.
Many, including J.D. Vance, argue this trend weakens the essential foundations of fairness, justice, and national security. As nations like the U.S. and Australia appear to be moving in the same direction, the global implications become even clearer. It's time to have a serious conversation about the future of liberal democracies and whether they can still uphold the ideals they were built upon. Share your views in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth content. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.